The whip cracked against the silent morning air of Tucson, Arizona, in 1878, drawing gasps from the crowd gathered in the town square. Beatrice Dawson bit down on her lip until she tasted blood, refusing to cry out as the leather bit into her back for the third time. She would not give Sheriff Harmon the satisfaction of hearing her scream, even as her blue calico dress grew damp with sweat and blood. Owen Reeves had just ridden into town, his stallion's hooves kicking up dust along the main street when he heard the unmistakable sound of a whipping. The tall cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. Tying his horse to the nearest post, he followed the growing crowd toward the commotion in the square. "This woman has been found guilty of theft," Sheriff Harmon announced to the gathered townspeople, his voice carrying across the square. 20 lashes is the punishment." Owen pushed his way through the crowd, his weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. What he saw made his blood boil. A slender woman with honey-colored hair was tied to the whipping post, her dress torn at the back, angry red welts already visible on her exposed skin. The sheriff pulled his arm back for another strike, but before the whip could fall, Owen lunged forward. His hand shot out and caught the whip mid-air, wrapping the leather cord around his fist. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of thunder. Sheriff Harmon's face reddened with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are? This is a lawful punishment." 3 lashes for a loaf of bread seems far from lawful," Owen replied, having overheard the murmurs in the crowd. He maintained his grip on the whip, unwavering. "I'll pay for whatever she's accused of taking." The sheriff yanked at the whip, but Owen held firm. The crowd had gone silent, watching the standoff between the stranger and their law officer. "This isn't your concern, cowboy. Move along before you find yourself in a cell." Owen reached into his vest pocket and pulled out several gold coins, tossing them at the sheriff's feet. "That should cover the bread and whatever else you claim she owes. Now cut her down." Beatrice lifted her head weakly, her vision blurry with unshed tears. Through the haze, she saw a tall man in a dusty duster standing between her and the sheriff. She couldn't make out his features clearly, but she'd remember that voice deep and steady for the rest of her life. The sheriff looked from Owen to the gathered crowd, sensing the shift in public sentiment. With visible reluctance, he lowered the whip. "Fine. Take the thief if you want her so badly, but if she steals again, it'll be the both of you at this post." Owen didn't wait for further discussion. He moved to Beatrice's side, pulling a knife from his boot to cut the ropes binding her wrists. When she swayed on her feet, he caught her gently by the arms. "Easy now, miss," he said softly, only for her ears. "Can you walk?" Beatrice nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. Pride made her straighten her back despite the pain. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." Owen removed his duster and draped it carefully over her shoulders, covering the torn back of her dress and the wounds beneath. He was acutely aware of the townsfolk watching, some with curiosity, others with disapproval. "I have a room at the hotel," he said. "We need to tend to your back." Under normal circumstances, Beatrice would never have considered going to a hotel room with a stranger, but these were far from normal circumstances. She nodded again, allowing him to guide her away from the post of her humiliation. The crowd parted as they walked slowly toward the Tucson Grand Hotel. Owen kept a respectful distance but remained close enough to catch Beatrice if she faltered. Neither spoke until they were inside the relative privacy of the hotel lobby. "Owen Reeves," he introduced himself quietly. "I've just arrived in town." "Beatrice Dawson," she replied, her voice stronger than she expected. "And I believe I owe you my life, Mr. Reeves." The hotel clerk eyed them with suspicion as Owen requested a basin of hot water and clean cloths be sent to his room. "And fetch the doctor," he added, pressing a coin into the clerk's palm to ensure discretion and haste. Once in the modest hotel room, Owen pulled the room's single chair out for Beatrice. "Sit facing the back," he suggested. "I need to look at those wounds, Miss Dawson." Beatrice hesitated, then slowly took the seat as instructed. "I didn't steal that bread," she said suddenly, needing him to know. "Mr. Miller at the bakery gave it to me because it was day old, the sheriff." She swallowed hard. "He's been looking for reasons to punish me since I refused his advances last month." Owen's jaw tightened at her words. It was a tale he'd heard before in other towns, lawmen abusing their power, especially against women without protection. "I believe you," he said simply, and Beatrice felt something inside her uncoil slightly at those 3 words. A knock at the door announced the arrival of hot water and cloths. The doctor, a gray-haired man named Peterson, arrived shortly after. He examined Beatrice's wounds with clinical efficiency. "These need cleaning and salve," he pronounced. "Nothing too deep, thankfully, but there'll be scarring." He glanced at Owen. "Your wife is fortunate you stopped it when you did." Neither Beatrice nor Owen corrected the doctor's assumption. It was safer this way. Dr. Peterson cleaned the lash marks and applied a soothing salve before bandaging Beatrice's back. "Rest for a few days," he instructed. "No hard work until these have healed somewhat." When the doctor left, an awkward silence fell between them. Owen stood by the window, giving Beatrice as much privacy as the small room allowed. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked. "You don't know me." Owen turned to look at her, his green eyes serious beneath the brim of his hat, which he still hadn't removed. "I've seen too many injustices in this world to walk by another," he said. "No one deserves to be whipped in public, especially not for a crime they didn't commit." Beatrice studied him, noting the way he held himself straight-backed but not rigid, confident but not arrogant. His clothes were travel-worn but well-maintained, and the gun at his hip looked like it had seen use but was cared for meticulously. "You're not just passing through, are you?" she asked. Owen shook his head. "I bought the old Richardson place about 10 miles outside town, planning to raise horses." He paused. "What about you? Do you have family here?" Beatrice's expression clouded. "My father died 6 months ago, consumption. He was a shopkeeper, but there were debts. The bank took everything." She straightened slightly. "I've been working at the dressmaker's shop, but business has been slow. Mrs. Thompson can only afford to keep me on 3 days a week." Owen nodded, understanding the precarious position of a woman alone in a frontier town. "You need somewhere to stay tonight. I can get you another room here." "I have a room," Beatrice said quickly. "A small place behind the dressmaker's shop. Mrs. Thompson lets me stay there in exchange for opening the shop each morning." She attempted to stand, wincing at the pull on her wounded back. "I should return before she worries." "At least let me walk you there," Owen insisted. "After what happened today, it's not safe for you to be alone." Beatrice wanted to protest that she had been alone for months and had managed, but today's events had shaken her confidence. She nodded gratefully. The walk to the dressmaker's shop was slow, with Beatrice setting the pace. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty streets of Tucson, and she was thankful for Owen's duster, which shielded her torn dress from view. "How long have you been in Tucson?" Owen asked, attempting to distract her from the pain and the curious stares of passers-by. "All my life," Beatrice replied. "My parents came here from Boston before I was born. Father always said the dry air would be good for his health." She gave a sad smile. In the end, it wasn't enough. They reached the back of the dressmaker's shop, where a small door led to what had once been a storeroom, now converted into Beatrice's modest living quarters. Mrs. Thompson, a plump woman with kind eyes, rushed out when she saw them approaching. Beatrice, I heard what happened in the square. That horrible man. She looked at Owen suspiciously. And who might you be? This is Mr. Reeves, Beatrice explained. He stopped the sheriff and brought me to the doctor. Mrs. Thompson's expression softened immediately. Then you have my thanks, Mr. Reeves. Beatrice is a good girl, never stole anything in her life. I believe that, madam, Owen said, tipping his hat politely. I was just ensuring Miss Dawson got home safely. You come inside too, Mrs. Thompson insisted. I've just made tea, and you look like you could use some refreshment after your journey. Inside the small back room, which contained only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for Beatrice's belongings, Mrs. Thompson fussed over the injured woman. She helped Beatrice change into a clean nightdress behind a privacy screen while Owen waited outside. When he was invited back in, Beatrice was sitting on her bed, looking pale but composed. The doctor says she needs rest, Owen informed Mrs. Thompson. The wounds aren't deep, but they'll be painful for a while. She'll have it, the older woman assured him. The shop can manage without her for a few days. Beatrice started to protest, but Mrs. Thompson hushed her. No arguments, you need to heal. She turned to Owen. Now, Mr. Reeves, tell us about this ranch you've purchased. Over cups of tea, Owen explained his plans for the Richardson place. He'd spent years working cattle drives across Texas and New Mexico, saving every penny to buy his own spread. The Richardson ranch was smaller than he'd originally wanted, but the price had been right, and the land had good water and grazing. Horses fetch better prices than cattle these days, he explained. Especially good stock. I've got 2 stallions and 6 mares to start with. Sounds like a lot of work for one man, Mrs. Thompson observed, giving him a calculating look that made Beatrice blush. I'll hire help as I need it, Owen replied, either missing or ignoring the implication. For now, I'm just focused on getting the house and stables in order. As the sun began to set, Owen stood to take his leave. I should get back to the hotel. I've got supplies to purchase tomorrow before heading out to the ranch. He looked at Beatrice. Miss Dawson, I hope you recover quickly. Thank you again, Mr. Reeves, Beatrice said softly. I don't know how I can repay you. No need, he assured her. Just take care of yourself. He hesitated, then added, if you need anything, I'll be in town for the next 2 days. After that, I'll be at the ranch. After Owen left, Mrs. Thompson gave Beatrice a knowing smile. That's a good man there, Bea. Don't see many like him these days. Beatrice nodded, though her mind was troubled. He is kind, but I can't help wondering why the sheriff has such a grudge against me. This isn't the first time he's accused me falsely. Mrs. Thompson's face grew serious. Sheriff Harmon has always been a difficult man, but he's gotten worse since his wife left him last year. He takes it out on those he thinks can't fight back. She patted Beatrice's hand. You just rest now. Things will look brighter in the morning. But morning brought fresh troubles. Beatrice woke to the sound of raised voices in the shop. Carefully, mindful of her injured back, she dressed and made her way to the front of the store. There she found Sheriff Harmon confronting Mrs. Thompson. Harboring a thief makes you complicit, the sheriff was saying. I could shut this shop down. She's no thief, and you know it, James Harmon, Mrs. Thompson replied, standing her ground. You're just sore because she wouldn't warm your bed. The sheriff's face darkened with anger. Watch your mouth, Martha. I'm still the law in this town. A poor excuse for it, came a deep voice from the doorway. Owen stood there, his stance casual but his eyes hard as flint. Sheriff Harmon turned, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. You again. I thought you'd be smart enough to leave town after yesterday. I've got business here, Owen replied calmly, and it seems like every time I turn around you're harassing innocent women. The sheriff sneered. You don't know anything about this town or these people, stranger. I know right from wrong, Owen countered. And I know that public whipping for an imagined offense is wrong in any town. Beatrice stepped forward, ignoring the pain in her back. Sheriff, I've done nothing to deserve your enmity. Please leave Mrs. Thompson's shop in peace. The sheriff looked from Beatrice to Owen, then back to Mrs. Thompson. Something in their united front made him reconsider his position. This isn't over, he warned before stalking out of the shop. Once he was gone, Beatrice sagged against the counter. Owen was at her side immediately, steadying her with a gentle hand at her elbow. You should be resting, he chided softly. I heard the commotion, she explained. I couldn't let Mrs. Thompson face him alone. You're both too stubborn for your own good, Mrs. Thompson declared, but her tone was affectionate. Mr. Reeves, what brings you to our shop this morning? I came to check on Miss Dawson, he admitted, and to let you know that I've spoken with Judge Parker about yesterday's incident. He's agreed to look into the sheriff's conduct. Beatrice looked up at him in surprise. You went to the judge for me? Owen nodded. Judge Parker is a fair man. He didn't approve of the public whipping, especially without a proper trial. That's more than anyone else has done, Mrs. Thompson said approvingly. Now, Beatrice, back to bed with you. I can manage the shop today. Beatrice reluctantly agreed, but before returning to her room, she turned to Owen. Thank you for speaking to the judge. I've been afraid to confront the sheriff directly. With good reason, Owen replied. Men like that are dangerous when challenged. He hesitated. I've got errands to run in town today, but I'd like to check on you again before I leave for the ranch tomorrow. I'd like that, Beatrice said softly, feeling a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with her injuries. After she returned to her room, Mrs. Thompson gave Owen a shrewd look. You've taken quite an interest in our Beatrice. Owen shifted slightly, uncomfortable under her gaze. She was treated unjustly. I just want to make sure she's safe. Mrs. Thompson murmured, clearly unconvinced by his explanation. Well, she could use a friend. Life hasn't been kind to her this past year. Has the sheriff always had it in for her? Owen asked. Mrs. Thompson shook her head. It started after her father died. Harmon thought she'd be easy pickings, a woman alone in debt. When she rejected his advances, he started finding reasons to make her life difficult. She sighed. Beatrice is too proud to leave Tucson, even though there's nothing holding her here anymore. Owen processed this information, his jaw tight with anger at the sheriff's behavior. Is there anyone in town she could stay with, somewhere safer than this back room? I've offered her a place in my home, but she refuses to impose, Mrs. Thompson replied. Says she needs to stand on her own 2 feet. Owen nodded, understanding that kind of pride all too well. I'll be back later today, he promised, before taking his leave. The day passed slowly for Beatrice. Her back throbbed with pain when she moved, but she forced herself to get up periodically to stretch her legs. By late afternoon, she was feeling restless and made her way back to the shop, where she found Mrs. Thompson with a customer. You should be resting, Mrs. Thompson chided when the customer left. I'm going mad just lying there, Beatrice confessed. Let me at least sit at the counter for a while. Mrs. Thompson relented, and Beatrice settled onto a stool behind the shop's front counter. It felt good to be doing something normal, even if she couldn't handle her usual sewing tasks. Just before closing time, Owen returned to the shop. He'd purchased supplies for the ranch, and his arms were laden with parcels when he entered. Beatrice couldn't help noticing that he'd gotten a haircut and a shave, his strong jaw now visible without the trail dust and stubble of the previous day. Miss Dawson, he greeted her, his expression warming. It's good to see you up and about. Mr. Reeves, she replied with a small smile. You look different without half the trail on your face. He chuckled, setting his parcels down. Figured I should look respectable if I'm to be a rancher. His gaze turned serious. "How's your back?" "Sore," she admitted, "but better than yesterday." Mrs. Thompson had been watching their interaction with interest. "Mr. Reeves, will you join us for supper? I've made a pot of stew and there's plenty." Owen hesitated, then nodded. "That's mighty kind of you, Mrs. Thompson. I'd be honored." The three of them shared a simple but hearty meal in the back room. Conversation flowed easily as Owen told stories of his travels across the West, and Beatrice shared memories of growing up in Tucson when it was little more than a dusty outpost. "It's grown considerably," Owen observed. "That's part of why I chose this area for my ranch. The railroad's bringing more people, which means more demand for good horses." "It's changed," Beatrice agreed. "Not always for the better." She didn't elaborate, but Owen suspected she was thinking of the sheriff and others like him who saw the growing town as an opportunity for personal gain. After the meal, Mrs. Thompson made her excuses, claiming she needed to check on a neighbor. Both Beatrice and Owen knew it was a transparent attempt to leave them alone, but neither commented on it. In the quiet that followed Mrs. Thompson's departure, Owen grew serious. "I spoke with Judge Parker again this afternoon. He's issued a warning to Sheriff Harmon about his behavior toward you." Beatrice looked down at her hands. "That may just make him angrier." "The judge also suggested that it might be wise for you to stay somewhere else for a while," Owen continued carefully. "Somewhere the sheriff wouldn't look for you." Beatrice's head snapped up. "Leave Tucson, but this is my home." "Not leave permanently," Owen clarified. "Just until things settle down. Judge Parker thinks Harmon will lose interest if you're not around to provoke him." "Where would I go?" Beatrice asked, sounding lost despite her earlier declaration about Tucson being home. Owen took a deep breath. "I have a proposition for you." "It's not ideal, but hear me out." He leaned forward. "My ranch needs a housekeeper. The previous owner was a widower who let the place fall into disrepair. The house is sound but needs a woman's touch." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You're offering me employment?" "Yes," Owen said firmly. "Room and board plus wages, and distance from Sheriff Harmon." "But we barely know each other," Beatrice protested, though something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "True enough," Owen acknowledged. "But Mrs. Thompson can vouch for your character, and I'd like to think my actions have shown something of mine." He paused. "It would be a strictly professional arrangement. You'd have your own room and your duties would be limited to the house." Beatrice considered his offer. The thought of leaving Tucson was frightening, but the prospect of facing Sheriff Harmon again was worse. And there was something about Owen Reeves that made her feel safe. "I'd need to discuss it with Mrs. Thompson," she said finally. "She depends on me for help in the shop." "Of course," Owen agreed. "Take your time. I'll be leaving for the ranch tomorrow afternoon, but I can delay a day if necessary." When Mrs. Thompson returned and heard Owen's proposition, she surprised Beatrice by immediately endorsing it. "It's perfect," the older woman declared. "You need to get away from Harmon's influence, and I've been worried sick about you staying in this back room alone." "But your shop," Beatrice began. "I can hire Lily Jenkins to help," Mrs. Thompson said dismissively. "Her mother's been asking me for months to give the girl some work." Beatrice looked between Mrs. Thompson and Owen, feeling as though events were moving too quickly. "May I have the night to consider it?" she asked. "Of course," Owen said immediately. "I'll come by in the morning for your answer." After Owen left, Mrs. Thompson sat down beside Beatrice. "That man is offering you a way out, Bea. I think you should take it." "It seems improper," Beatrice whispered. "A single woman living in a house with a bachelor." "Times are changing," Mrs. Thompson said pragmatically, "and it's not like you'd be sharing a room." Besides, he strikes me as an honorable man." "He does seem to be," Beatrice agreed. "But what if I'm wrong? I'd be 10 miles from town alone with him." Mrs. Thompson patted her hand. "Trust your instincts, dear. They've served you well so far." She rose to leave. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Beatrice barely slept that night, her mind turning over Owen's offer. By morning, she had made her decision. When Owen arrived at the shop shortly after opening, she was waiting for him. "I've decided to accept your offer, Mr. Reeves," she said formally. "On a trial basis. If either of us finds the arrangement unsuitable after 1 month, we can part ways with no hard feelings." Relief washed over Owen's face. "That's fair. And please, if we're to be living under the same roof, call me Owen." "Then you must call me Beatrice," she replied with a small smile. They agreed that Owen would return the following morning with a wagon to collect Beatrice and her belongings. This would give her time to pack and say her goodbyes to Mrs. Thompson and the few other friends she had in town. As Owen left the shop, he nearly collided with Sheriff Harmon on the boardwalk outside. The sheriff's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Seemed to be spending a lot of time at the dressmaker's shop for a man," he commented. "Didn't take you for the type to need fancy clothes." "Just checking on Miss Dawson's recovery," Owen replied evenly, refusing to be provoked. The sheriff stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know what you're up to, Reeves. Playing the hero, thinking it'll get you under her skirts, but mark my words, that woman's trouble. Has been since her daddy died." Owen's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "You do well to remember Judge Parker's warning, Sheriff. Good day to you." He walked away, his back straight, feeling Harmon's glare boring into him. The encounter left Owen uneasy. The sheriff's interest in Beatrice clearly went beyond professional jurisdiction. It reinforced his belief that getting her out of town was the right decision. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Owen arrived at the dressmaker's shop with a rented wagon shortly after sunrise, hoping to leave town before most people were about their business. Beatrice was ready, her meager possessions packed in a single trunk. Mrs. Thompson stood by, fighting tears as she fussed over Beatrice's traveling clothes. "You write to me," the older woman insisted. "Let me know how you're settling in." "I will," Beatrice promised, embracing her friend carefully to avoid putting pressure on her healing back. "Thank you for everything, Martha." Owen loaded Beatrice's trunk into the wagon, then helped her up to the seat beside him. With a final wave to Mrs. Thompson, they set off toward the outskirts of town. The journey to the Richardson Ranch, now the Reeves Ranch, Beatrice supposed took just over 2 hours. As they left the bustle of Tucson behind, the landscape opened up into rugged beauty. The Sonoran Desert stretched out around them, dotted with saguaro cacti and mesquite trees. In the distance, mountains rose against the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful out here," Beatrice commented, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Owen nodded. "That's what drew me to this land. There's a wildness to it, but a peacefulness too." As they crested a small rise, the ranch came into view. The house was a substantial adobe structure with a wooden porch wrapping around 2 sides. A large barn stood nearby, along with several smaller outbuildings. A corral contained the horses Owen had mentioned, magnificent animals that raised their heads at the sound of the approaching wagon. "Home sweet home," Owen said, a note of pride in his voice. "It needs work, but the bones are good." "It's lovely," Beatrice said sincerely, taking in the setting. The house was positioned to capture the breeze and had a view of both the mountains and a small creek that wound its way through the property. Owen pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and helped Beatrice down. "Let me show you around before we bring your things in." The interior of the house was spacious but Spartan. The main floor consisted of a large kitchen, a dining area, a sitting room, and what had clearly been the former owner's study. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms and a small bathing room. "This would be your room," Owen said, showing her the brightest of the bedrooms. It had a window overlooking the creek and contained a bed, a dresser, and a small writing desk. "I know it's plain, but you can fix it up however you like." "It's perfect," Beatrice assured him, already picturing the curtains she could sew and the quilt she had packed that would brighten the space. After the tour, Owen brought in her trunk and placed it in her room. "I'll let you get settled," he said. "I need to check on the horses. The kitchen is stocked with basic supplies, but we'll need to make a trip to town soon for more." Left alone, Beatrice began unpacking her few possessions. She made the bed with fresh linens she found in the dresser drawer and placed her mother's silver hairbrush on top of the dresser. The simple act of arranging her belongings in this new space made it begin to feel like home. When she ventured downstairs, she found the kitchen in desperate need of attention. Dust covered every surface, and the stove clearly hadn't been cleaned in months. Removing her good traveling dress and donning an apron she found hanging by the door, Beatrice set to work. By the time Owen returned from the barn, the kitchen was transformed. The surfaces gleamed, the floor had been swept, and a pot of coffee simmered on the newly cleaned stove. Owen stopped in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "You didn't have to do all this today," he said. "You're still healing." Beatrice shrugged slightly, trying not to wince at the pull on her wounds. "I like to keep busy, and a clean kitchen makes everything else easier." Owen poured himself a cup of the coffee, inhaling the aroma appreciatively. "This is better than the mud I've been making," he admitted with a grin. "Tomorrow I'll tackle the rest of the downstairs," Beatrice said, already planning her approach. "The house has good bones, like you said. It just needs some care." "Like everything on this ranch," Owen agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I hope you'll be happy here, Beatrice. I know it's not what you're used to." "What I'm used to is hard work," she replied honestly. "And this feels more purposeful than hemming dresses for women who look down their noses at me." Owen's expression softened. "Well, there's no one to look down their noses at you here, except maybe the horses, and that's just because they're taller." Beatrice laughed, a sound she realized she hadn't made in quite some time. It felt good. The next few days fell into a pattern. Beatrice would rise early to prepare breakfast before Owen headed out to work on the ranch. She spent her days cleaning the house room by room, scrubbing away years of bachelor living. Owen worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, tending to the horses, and clearing land for expanded pastures. They would meet again at supper, sharing the meal and conversation about their respective days. Owen told her about his plans for breeding quarter horses, while Beatrice described her discoveries around the house, a hidden cupboard in the pantry, a collection of books in the study that included some of her favorites. On the 5th day, Owen returned to the house earlier than usual. Beatrice was in the sitting room, hanging curtains she had sewn from fabric she'd found in a trunk upstairs. "Those look nice," he commented, startling her slightly. "The whole house is starting to look different." Beatrice stepped back to admire her handiwork. "Just a woman's touch, like you said." She turned to face him. "You're back early. Is everything all right? I need to make a trip to town tomorrow for supplies," Owen explained. "I was wondering if you'd like to come along. You might want to pick up some things for the house." Beatrice hesitated. "Is it safe, the sheriff?" "We'll be in and out," Owen assured her. "And I don't think Harmon would try anything in broad daylight, not after Judge Parker's warning." The prospect of selecting items for the house was tempting. "All right," she agreed. "I could use some fabric for more curtains, and the pantry needs restocking." They set out for Tucson early the next morning. Beatrice wore her best day dress and a bonnet to shield her face from the sun. As they drove, she found herself relaxing in Owen's company. There was something steadying about his presence, a quiet confidence that put her at ease. Their first stop in town was the general store, where Owen purchased tools, nails, and other ranch supplies. Beatrice selected flour, sugar, coffee, and dried goods for the kitchen, along with fabric for curtains and cushions. The shopkeeper wrapped their purchases while Owen settled the bill. "Will you be attending the Founders' Day dance next weekend, Mr. Reeves?" The shopkeeper asked conversationally. "The whole town turns out for it." Owen glanced at Beatrice before replying. "I hadn't planned on it. Plenty of work at the ranch." "It's quite the event," the man continued. "Been a tradition since before I was born. Good way to meet your neighbors." Beatrice busied herself examining a bolt of calico, pretending not to listen. The idea of a dance brought back memories of happier times, when her father was alive and their social standing in Tucson had been secure. After the general store, they visited the feed store for grain and the blacksmith for horseshoes. Their final stop was Mrs. Thompson's shop, where Beatrice was greeted with a warm embrace. "You look well," Mrs. Thompson declared, holding Beatrice at arm's length to examine her. "Country living must agree with you." "It does," Beatrice admitted with a smile. "The air is cleaner and the company is better." She blushed slightly at her own words. Mrs. Thompson's eyes twinkled knowingly. "I've just put on a pot of tea. You'll both stay for a cup." "Over tea, Mrs." Thompson updated them on town gossip. Sheriff Harmon had been unusually subdued since Beatrice's departure, though he'd been asking questions about Owen's ranch. "He's a man who doesn't like losing," Mrs. Thompson warned. "Be careful, both of you." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Thompson pressed a package into Beatrice's hands. "A few things I thought you might need," she explained. "And Lily made you some preserves. The girl's working out well, by the way." The return journey to the ranch was quiet, both Beatrice and Owen lost in their own thoughts. The mention of Sheriff Harmon had cast a shadow over their otherwise pleasant day. "You think he'll cause more trouble?" Beatrice finally asked as the ranch came into view. Owen's jaw tightened. "He might try, but you're safe at the ranch, Beatrice. I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice warmed her, and she found herself believing him completely. That evening, as they unpacked their purchases, Beatrice came across the package from Mrs. Thompson. Inside, she found a beautiful blue dress, clearly meant for special occasions, along with a note. "For the Founders' Day dance. Every woman deserves to feel pretty." Beatrice ran her fingers over the soft fabric, torn between pleasure at the gift and anxiety at the thought of returning to town for such a public event. "What's that?" Owen asked, noticing her distraction. Beatrice showed him the dress. "Mrs. Thompson seems to think we should attend the Founders' Day dance." Owen scratched his jaw thoughtfully. "Would you like to go?" The question caught Beatrice off guard. I'm not sure. It might be awkward, given what happened the last time I was in the town square." "People have short memories," Owen said, "and longer ones for good times than bad. It might be good for you to be seen enjoying yourself, head held high." Beatrice considered his words. There was wisdom in what he said, but also risk. "Would you go with me, as my escort?" The question hung in the air between them. It was the first acknowledgement that their relationship might be something more than employer and housekeeper. "I'd be honored," Owen said simply. The days leading up to the dance were busy ones. Owen worked from sunrise to sunset on the ranch, determined to complete certain repairs before taking time away. Beatrice continued her transformation of the house, which was beginning to feel truly like a home. The night before the dance, Beatrice tried on Mrs. Thompson's gift. The blue dress fit perfectly, highlighting her slender figure and bringing out the color of her eyes. For the first time in months, she looked at her reflection and saw something other than a woman struggling to survive. The next morning, Beatrice was up early, preparing food for their journey and for the communal tables that were traditionally part of the Founders' Day celebration. She baked bread and made fried apple pies, tasks that brought back memories of helping her mother in the kitchen as a child. Owen appeared in the doorway as she was packing the food into a basket. He was freshly shaven, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed, wearing a clean shirt and his best trousers. "You look nice," Beatrice said, feeling suddenly shy. "Been saving these clothes for a special occasion," he replied with a small smile. "Figured a dance with a pretty lady qualifies." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I'll just go change," she murmured, hurrying upstairs. When she descended a short time later in the blue dress, her honey-colored hair arranged in a simple but elegant style, Owen's expression made her blush deepen. "You look beautiful," he said softly. The journey to town was filled with a nervous energy. Beatrice couldn't remember the last time she'd attended a social event, and certainly not one where she might be the subject of whispers and stares. Owen seemed to sense her anxiety. "Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of," he said as they approached the outskirts of Tucson. "Hold your head high." The town square had been transformed for the celebration. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, tables laden with food lined one side, and a space had been cleared for dancing. A small band was setting up on a makeshift stage. As Owen helped Beatrice down from the wagon, she was acutely aware of the curious glances from the townsfolk already gathered. Some looked away quickly when she met their gaze, others nodded in greeting. Mrs. Thompson bustled over to them immediately. "You came, and don't you both look splendid?" "The dress fits perfectly, Beatrice." "Thanks to you," Beatrice replied, embracing her friend. "And thank you for the nudge to attend. I might not have had the courage otherwise." They added Beatrice's contributions to the food tables, then joined a group that included the doctor who had treated her wounds and the judge Owen had spoken to about the sheriff. "Miss Dawson, it's good to see you recovered," Judge Parker said warmly. "Mr. Reeves tells me you're keeping house for him out at the old Richardson place." "Yes, Your Honor," Beatrice replied. "It's a lovely property." The judge nodded approvingly. "Owen's making good improvements from what I hear. The territory needs more solid citizens putting down roots." As the evening progressed, Beatrice found herself relaxing. The townsfolk were either genuinely pleased to see her or polite enough to hide any contrary feelings. She danced with the doctor and the judge, and even the mayor asked her for a turn around the floor. Owen watched from the sidelines, declining offers to dance from several eligible young women. His eyes rarely left Beatrice, tracking her movements as she gradually reclaimed her place in Tucson society. When the band struck up a waltz, Owen finally approached her. "May I have this dance, Miss Dawson?" he asked formally, extending his hand. Beatrice placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Reeves." As they moved together across the makeshift dance floor, Beatrice was surprised by Owen's grace. "You dance very well for a cowboy," she teased. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a smile. "Said no son of hers would be a wallflower at social gatherings. She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Owen agreed, a flicker of sadness crossing his features. "She passed 5 years ago. My father followed a year later." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said softly. "It's hard to lose parents." Owen's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "It is. But they'd be happy to know I finally have my own ranch. It was always my dream, even when my brothers were content to stay on our family's place in Texas." As the music continued, They talked of family and dreams, moving together as if they'd been dancing partners for years. Beatrice found herself studying Owen's face, the laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the determined set of his jaw, the way his expression softened when he spoke of things he cared about. The spell was broken by a commotion at the edge of the square. Sheriff Harmon had arrived, clearly having visited the saloon first. His loud voice carried across the gathering as he argued with one of his deputies. "Trouble," Owen murmured, his body tensing. "Maybe we should head home." Beatrice nodded, disappointed but understanding the wisdom of avoiding confrontation. They made their goodbyes to Mrs. Thompson and were heading toward their wagon when Sheriff Harmon spotted them. "Well, look who's here," he called out, his words slurring slightly. "The thief and her champion." Beatrice froze, feeling the eyes of the entire gathering upon them. Owen placed a protective hand at the small of her back. "Let's keep walking," he said quietly, but the sheriff was not to be ignored. He strode toward them, his badge gleaming in the lantern light. "Thought you could just waltz back into town like nothing happened?" he demanded, glaring at Beatrice. "Miss Dawson has every right to attend a public celebration," Owen said evenly. "And we were just leaving, so if you'll excuse us." Sheriff Harmon blocked their path. "Not so fast, Reeves. I've been doing some asking around about you. Seems you left Texas under a cloud, something about a dispute with a powerful rancher." Owen's face hardened. "That's ancient history and twisted truth. Now step aside, Sheriff. You're making a scene." By now, a small crowd had gathered to watch the confrontation. Judge Parker pushed his way through. "That's enough, James," he said firmly. "You're disrupting the celebration." The sheriff turned his bleary gaze to the judge. "Just doing my job, Your Honor. Making sure known criminals don't take advantage of our hospitality." "The only criminal behavior I'm seeing is harassment," the judge replied coldly. "Go home and sleep it off." For a moment it seemed the sheriff might defy even the judge, then his shoulders slumped slightly. "Fine. But I'm watching both of you." He jabbed a finger at Owen, then at Beatrice, before allowing his deputy to lead him away. The gathered crowd dispersed slowly, murmuring among themselves. Beatrice felt her earlier confidence evaporating under their curious stares. "I think it's definitely time to leave," she whispered to Owen. He nodded grimly, guiding her to their wagon with a protective hand still at her back. Neither spoke until they were well outside town, the lights of Tucson fading behind them. "I'm sorry," Owen finally said. "I shouldn't have encouraged you to attend. I underestimated Harmon's obsession." "It's not your fault," Beatrice assured him, "and until he appeared I was having a wonderful time." She hesitated. "What did he mean about you leaving Texas under a cloud?" Owen was silent for so long that Beatrice thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was tight with old anger. "I worked for a big rancher named Sullivan. He accused one of my friends, a Mexican vaquero, of stealing cattle. There was no evidence, just Sullivan's word against Pedro's. When they came to lynch Pedro, I helped him escape." Owen's hands gripped the reins tightly. "Sullivan wanted me arrested as an accomplice, but the local sheriff was one of the few honest men in the county. He suggested I might want to seek opportunities elsewhere, though." "You saved your friend's life," Beatrice said softly. "There's no shame in that." "No shame, but consequences nonetheless," Owen replied. "I had to leave behind everything I'd worked for, start over with just what I could carry." "Like me," Beatrice murmured. Owen glanced at her, his expression softening. "I suppose so. Maybe that's why." He trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. The rest of the journey passed in comfortable silence. As they approached the ranch, Beatrice felt a sense of homecoming that surprised her. In just a few short weeks, this place had become more of a home to her than the room behind Mrs. Thompson's shop had ever been. Inside the house, Owen built a fire to ward off the night chill while Beatrice made tea. They sat together in the sitting room, the flames casting a warm glow over the now cozy space. "Despite the ending, I'm glad we went," Beatrice said, sipping her tea. "It felt good to be part of the community again, if only for a few hours." "You were the belle of the ball," Owen remarked with a small smile. "Every man wanted to dance with you." Beatrice lowered her eyes. "Not every dance partner was as skilled as you." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Beatrice found herself studying Owen's profile as he gazed into the flames. There was strength there, but gentleness too, a rare combination in her experience. "I should head up to bed," she said finally, rising from her chair. "It's been a long day." Owen stood as well. "Beatrice," he said, his voice low, "I want you to know that your reputation is safe here. Whatever the sheriff or anyone else might imply about our arrangement, you have my word as a gentleman that I respect you completely." Touched by his earnestness, Beatrice impulsively reached out and touched his arm. "I know that, Owen. I've never felt safer than I have here with you." Their eyes met in the firelight, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then Beatrice stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Good night, Owen," she said softly. "Good night, Beatrice," he replied, his gaze following her as she left the room. In the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred in their relationship. There were lingering glances across the dinner table, hands that brushed when passing dishes, conversations that stretched late into the evening. Neither acknowledged the growing attraction between them, but both felt it. 2 weeks after the Founders' Day dance, Owen announced that he needed to make another trip to town for supplies. "I can go alone," he offered. "After what happened last time, no," Beatrice interrupted. "I won't hide away. Besides, I promised Mrs. Thompson I'd visit." Owen nodded, respecting her decision. "We'll go tomorrow, then." The next morning dawned bright and clear. They set out early, hoping to complete their business and return to the ranch before evening. Tucson was bustling when they arrived, the streets filled with wagons and horsemen. Their first stop was Mrs. Thompson's shop, where Beatrice was greeted warmly by both her friend and young Lily Jenkins. While the women caught up on news and gossip, Owen excused himself to visit the feed store and the blacksmith. "I'll meet you at the general store in an hour," he told Beatrice before leaving. After a pleasant visit with Mrs. Thompson, Beatrice made her way to the general store. Owen had not yet arrived, so she began selecting the items they needed. She was examining a bolt of fabric when a familiar voice made her blood run cold. "Miss Dawson, shopping for your new home, are you?" Sheriff Harmon stood at the end of the aisle, his thumbs hooked in his belt. He appeared sober today, which somehow made his presence more threatening. "Good morning, Sheriff," Beatrice replied coolly, refusing to show fear. "Yes, I am." He moved closer, his voice lowering. "Tell me, how is life as a cowboy's woman? Better than what I offered you?" Beatrice's chin lifted defiantly. "My position as Mr. Reeves' housekeeper is entirely respectable, as you well know." The sheriff laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Housekeeper? Is that what they're calling it these days? The whole town knows what's really going on out at that ranch." "Then the whole town is mistaken," Beatrice replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have purchases to make." She tried to step past him, but he blocked her path. "Not so fast. I still haven't gotten justice for that stolen bread." "We both know there was no theft," Beatrice said, her patience wearing thin. "You're simply a man who can't accept rejection gracefully." The sheriff's face darkened with anger. "You think you're too good for me, a penniless seamstress with a father who died in debt." He grabbed her arm roughly. I could have given you security protection. Instead, you choose to spread your legs for the first drifter who, remove your hand, Harmon. Owen's voice cut through the store like a whip crack. He stood at the end of the aisle, his stance wide, hand hovering near his holstered gun. The sheriff released Beatrice's arm but didn't step back. Private conversation, Reeves, move along. Any conversation that involves manhandling a lady stops being private, Owen replied, his voice dangerously quiet. Miss Dawson, are you ready to leave? Beatrice nodded, moving toward Owen. The sheriff made no move to stop her this time, but his eyes burned with resentment. This isn't over, he warned as they turned to go. Yes, it is, Owen said firmly. You come near her again, and I'll have you up before Judge Parker so fast your head will spin. They paid for their purchases quickly and left the store. Outside, Beatrice drew a shaky breath. Are you all right? Owen asked, his eyes searching her face. Yes, she assured him. He just surprised me, that's all. She rubbed her arm where the sheriff had gripped it. We should finish our business and head home. They completed the rest of their errands efficiently, both eager to leave town. As Owen loaded their purchases into the wagon, Beatrice felt the weight of stares from passers-by. The sheriff's insinuations about their living arrangement had clearly spread. The journey back to the ranch was subdued. Beatrice stared at the landscape passing by, her thoughts troubled by the confrontation in the store. He won't stop, will he? She finally asked. Not until he's made me pay for rejecting him. Owen's jaw tightened. Men like that don't give up easily, but he can't touch you at the ranch. But we can't stay at the ranch forever, Beatrice pointed out. We'll need to go to town for supplies, for church, she broke off, suddenly aware of how she was including herself in Owen's future plans, as if her position in his household was permanent. Owen seemed to notice it too. He glanced at her, then back at the road. Beatrice, he said carefully, I know our arrangement was for a trial period of 1 month. That time is nearly up. I hope you'll consider staying on. I'd like to, she admitted softly. The ranch feels like home now. More than the house itself, it was Owen's steady presence that made her feel at home, but she couldn't bring herself to say that part aloud. They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning to set. Owen insisted on unloading the wagon himself, while Beatrice went inside to start supper. As she moved around the kitchen, she found herself humming softly, the tension from the town visit gradually easing from her shoulders. After supper, they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The night was warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of desert sage. I've been thinking, Owen said after a companionable silence, about what the sheriff said in town. Beatrice tensed slightly. Oh, people are going to talk no matter what we do, he continued. But there is a way to silence the worst of the gossip. He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the fading light. Beatrice, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've come to care for you deeply. Beatrice's heart began to race. Owen, please let me finish, he said gently. I'm not offering marriage just to protect your reputation. I'm offering because I can't imagine this ranch, this life without you in it. He took her hand in his. I love you, Beatrice Dawson. I think I have since I first saw you in that town square, refusing to break even in the face of cruelty. Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. I care for you too, Owen, more than I thought possible after so short a time. She squeezed his hand. But are you sure? Marriage is a serious step. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied, his voice steady. But if you need time to think about it, no, Beatrice interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. I don't need time. My answer is yes. Owen's face broke into a wide smile, years seeming to fall away with his joy. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. You've made me the happiest man in Arizona territory." They agreed to ride into Tucson the following Sunday to speak with the minister about publishing bans. Despite the potential for another confrontation with Sheriff Harmon, they were determined to do things properly. The next few days passed in a blur of happiness for Beatrice. She moved through her duties at the ranch with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Owen, too, seemed energized, whistling as he went about his work around the property. On Saturday evening, Owen rode out to check the fence line on the far side of the creek, promising to return before dark. As Beatrice prepared supper, she heard a horse approaching. Assuming it was Owen returning early, she went to the door with a welcoming smile. The smile died on her lips when she saw Sheriff Harmon dismounting in the yard. Beatrice's first instinct was to close and bar the door, but pride kept her standing in the doorway. "Sheriff Harmon, what brings you all the way out here?" "Official business," he replied, removing his hat with mock politeness. "I need to speak with Reeves." "He's not here at the moment," Beatrice said, keeping her voice steady. "He's checking fences and should return shortly. You can wait for him in town." The sheriff stepped closer, his eyes hard. "I think I'll wait right here if it's all the same to you." Every instinct warned Beatrice not to allow this man into the house, especially with Owen absent. "I'm afraid that's not possible. I was just about to leave myself to deliver some baked goods to a neighbor." It was a transparent lie, and they both knew it. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the sun would be setting soon. Sheriff Harmon's mouth curved in an unpleasant smile. "No need to lie, Miss Dawson. I know we're all alone out here." He took another step forward. "And that gives us a chance to finish our conversation from the general store." Beatrice backed into the house, reaching for the door to close it, but the sheriff was too quick. He pushed his way inside, forcing her to retreat farther into the room. "Get out," she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "You have no right to enter this house uninvited." "I'm the law," Harmon said, tossing his hat onto a side table. "I go where I please." His gaze traveled slowly over her, making her skin crawl. "You know, I came here planning to arrest Reeves. Found out about an outstanding warrant from Texas. But seeing you here all alone—" He shook his head. "Seems a shame to waste the opportunity." Beatrice's mind raced. The kitchen was behind her, with its knives and heavy cast iron pans that could serve as weapons. But to reach it, she'd have to turn her back on the sheriff. "Owen will be back any minute," she warned, edging sideways toward the kitchen doorway. "And there is no warrant." "He did nothing wrong in Texas," Harmon laughed. "Sullivan's got money and influence. Amazing what a warrant can appear for when the price is right." He followed her movement, matching each step. "As for Reeves returning soon, I passed him on my way in. He's a good 5 miles out, working on a broken fence. Plenty of time for you and me to get reacquainted." Beatrice's back hit the wall beside the kitchen doorway. The sheriff was between her and the front door now, cutting off that escape route. Her only option was to make it to the kitchen and arm herself. "I'll scream," she threatened, though she knew there was no one close enough to hear. "Scream all you want," Harmon replied, closing the distance between them. "No one but the coyotes will hear you." In a desperate move, Beatrice feinted to the left, then darted right through the kitchen doorway. She lunged for a knife on the table, but the sheriff was on her in an instant, his hand clamping around her wrist. Now," he chided, twisting her arm until she gasped in pain and dropped the knife. "That's not very hospitable." "Let me go." Beatrice struggled against his grip, kicking at his shins and scratching at his face with her free hand. The sheriff growled in pain when her nails caught his cheek, drawing blood. His expression darkened with rage, and he backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling to the floor. Dazed from the blow, Beatrice tried to crawl away, but Harmon grabbed her ankle, dragging her back. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, rolling her onto her back and pinning her with his weight. Beatrice fought with every ounce of strength she possessed, screaming and clawing at him as he tore at her dress. She managed to land a solid kick to his groin, making him howl in pain and momentarily loosen his grip. That brief respite was all she needed. Scrambling free, she ran for the back door, fumbling with the latch as she heard him recovering behind her. She burst out into the yard, heading for the barn where she knew Owen kept a rifle. She had just reached the barn door when a gunshot rang out, the bullet splintering the wood beside her head. Beatrice froze, turning slowly to see Sheriff Harmon standing in the yard, his revolver aimed squarely at her. "Next one won't miss," he promised, his face contorted with a mixture of pain and fury. "Get back in the house." For a long moment, Beatrice considered defying him, calculating her chances of reaching the rifle before he could fire again. But the cold determination in his eyes told her he wouldn't hesitate to shoot her. Slowly, she stepped away from the barn, her mind frantically searching for another way out of this nightmare. "That's better," Harmon said, gesturing with the gun. "Back inside. Now." As they neared the house, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. Owen was galloping toward the ranch, alerted by the gunshot. His face, when he saw the scene before him, Beatrice with torn clothing and a bruised face, Harmon holding a gun, transformed with a rage that made him almost unrecognizable. He leapt from his horse while it was still moving, drawing his own gun in a smooth motion. "Drop it, Harmon." The sheriff swung his revolver toward Owen instead. "I'm placing you under arrest, Reeves." "There's a warrant." "There's no warrant, and we both know it," Owen cut him off, his gun steady in his hand. "This is about Beatrice, not me. Now drop the gun before I put a bullet in you." For a tense moment, the two men faced each other across the yard, weapons drawn. Beatrice held her breath, terrified that one or both would die before her eyes. Then, in a motion almost too quick to follow, the sheriff fired. Owen dove to the side, the bullet grazing his shoulder as he rolled and came up shooting. His shot caught Harmon in the arm, making him drop his gun with a howl of pain. Owen was on him in an instant, delivering a powerful blow to the sheriff's jaw that sent him crashing to the ground. Standing over him, Owen kept his gun trained on Harmon's chest. "Beatrice," he called without taking his eyes off the sheriff. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she managed, her voice shaking. He tried to." "I know," Owen said grimly. "Get some rope from the barn. We're taking him to Judge Parker." Beatrice hurried to do as he asked, returning with a coil of rope. Owen efficiently bound the sheriff's hands behind his back, then used another length to tie his feet. "You're making a big mistake, Reeves," Harmon spat, blood trickling from his split lip. "My deputy will come looking for me." "Good," Owen replied coldly. "He can find you in Judge Parker's custody." He turned to Beatrice, his expression softening with concern. "Let's get you inside. You need to change before we ride to town." Inside the house, Beatrice quickly changed into her least damaged dress while Owen kept watch over their prisoner. Her hands trembled as she buttoned the bodice, the reality of what had nearly happened hitting her fully. When she emerged from the bedroom, Owen was waiting at the foot of the stairs. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I never should have left you alone." Beatrice clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "You couldn't have known he would come here." "I should have expected it," Owen said, his voice tight with self-recrimination. "After the way he's been fixating on you." He drew back slightly to look at her face, his fingers gently touching the bruise forming on her cheek. "Did he hurt you anywhere else?" "No," she assured him. I fought him off until you came. Pride flashed in Owen's eyes. You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Beatrice Dawson. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Let's get this over with. The sooner Harmon faces justice, the sooner we can put this behind us. They loaded the bound sheriff into the back of the wagon like cargo. He cursed and threatened the entire journey to Tucson, but Owen ignored him, his focus on Beatrice beside him on the wagon seat. It was late evening when they reached Judge Parker's home. The judge, disturbed from his supper, listened to their account with growing anger. When Beatrice described Harmon's assault, the judge's face darkened with fury. I've had concerns about James for some time, he admitted, but this. He shook his head in disgust. This is beyond the pale. He turned to his housekeeper. Send for Deputy Collins. Tell him to bring 2 men he trusts. When the deputy arrived, Judge Parker officially relieved Sheriff Harmon of his duties and ordered him held in the town jail pending formal charges. You can't do this, Harmon protested as he was dragged away. It's her word against mine, and her word is backed by the evidence of her torn clothing, the bruises on her face, and the bullet hole in Mr. Reeves' barn, the judge replied coldly. Your reign of terror in this town is over, James. After the former sheriff had been taken away, Judge Parker insisted that Beatrice and Owen stay the night at his home. It's too late to travel back to the ranch safely, he pointed out, and Miss Dawson has been through enough for one day. They gratefully accepted his hospitality. The judge's housekeeper showed Beatrice to a guest room where she finally allowed herself to break down, sobbing quietly into a pillow so no one would hear. A soft knock at the door roused her sometime later. Beatrice? Owen's voice came through the wood. Are you awake? She quickly wiped her face and went to the door, opening it to find Owen standing there, concern etched on his features. I heard you crying, he said softly. I couldn't leave you alone with your pain. Beatrice stepped back to let him in, propriety forgotten in the face of her need for his comforting presence. Owen closed the door quietly behind him and led her to the edge of the bed, where they sat side by side. It's over now, he assured her, taking her hands in his. Harmon will face trial for what he tried to do. Judge Parker won't let him escape justice. I know, Beatrice whispered. It's just, for a few moments today, I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence, her throat closing around the words. Owen gathered her into his arms, holding her as the tears came again. But you fought, he reminded her. You fought and you survived, and tomorrow we'll go home to our ranch and we'll start planning our future together. Our ranch, our future. The words warmed Beatrice despite her lingering fear. I love you, Owen, she said, the words she'd held back now flowing easily. I think I have since you caught that whip and said that's enough. Owen smiled, his eyes soft in the dim light of the bedside lamp. I loved you in that same moment, he admitted. Seeing your courage, your dignity, even in the face of such cruelty. How could I not fall in love with you? He leaned forward, hesitating a breath away from her lips, giving her the chance to pull away if she wasn't ready after the day's trauma. But Beatrice closed the distance herself, pressing her lips to his in a sweet, gentle kiss that held the promise of healing and hope. When they parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I should go back to my room, he said reluctantly. The judge has been kind enough to take us in. I shouldn't abuse his hospitality. Beatrice nodded, though part of her longed for him to stay to keep the nightmares at bay with his presence. Tomorrow, she said, echoing his earlier words. We'll go home tomorrow. The trial of James Harmon took place 2 weeks later. Beatrice testified about the assault at the ranch, her voice steady despite the former sheriff's glowering presence in the courtroom. Other women from Tucson came forward as well, sharing stories of harassment and intimidation that painted a damning picture of Harmon's abuse of power. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding him guilty. Judge Parker sentenced him to 15 years in Yuma Territorial Prison, a harsh place that few survive to the end of their terms. "Justice has been served," the judge announced as Harmon was led away in chains. "This community can begin to heal now." For Beatrice and Owen, healing had already begun. They were married the Sunday after the trial, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Tucson. Mrs. Thompson stood as Beatrice's witness, beaming with pride as she watched her friend begin a new chapter of her life. "You deserve this happiness," she whispered as she embraced Beatrice after the ceremony. "Both of you do." The reception was held in the town square, the same place where Beatrice had once been publicly humiliated. Now it was transformed into a celebration of love and new beginnings. The townsfolk, many of whom had stood by silently during her whipping, now offered congratulations and good wishes, perhaps seeking to make amends in some small way. Beatrice accepted their well wishes graciously, her hand tucked securely in the crook of Owen's arm. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Thompson had insisted on making for her, with tiny pearl buttons down the back and delicate lace at the cuffs. "Mrs. Reeves," Owen said, testing the sound of her new name as they shared the first dance as husband and wife. "It suits you." Beatrice smiled up at him, her heart full. "It does, doesn't it? Though I never imagined when I woke up that morning in the town square that I'd end the day meeting my future husband." "Life has a way of surprising us," Owen replied, his arms tightening around her waist. "Usually when we least expect it." As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and headed home to the ranch, their ranch now, in more than just words. Beatrice had moved her belongings from the guest room to the master bedroom the day before, a step that felt both momentous and natural. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Beatrice traced the outline of Owen's face with gentle fingers, memorizing every contour by touch. "Are you happy?" he asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Completely," she assured him. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, pulling her closer. "You've made this house a home, Beatrice, and you've made me whole in a way I didn't even know I was broken." 1 year later, the Reeves Ranch was thriving. Owen's breeding program had produced several promising foals, and his reputation for quality horses was growing throughout the territory. Beatrice had established a small garden near the house and had begun taking in sewing work from neighboring ranches, enjoying the chance to use her dressmaking skills again. They celebrated their first anniversary with a small dinner party for their closest friends, Mrs. Thompson, Judge Parker and his wife, and Dr. Peterson. The house rang with laughter and conversation, a far cry from the lonely bachelor dwelling Owen had purchased. After their guests had gone, Owen and Beatrice sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. Beatrice rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the peaceful moment. "I have news," she said softly, taking Owen's hand and placing it over her stomach. "Dr. Peterson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby." Owen's face transformed with wonder and joy. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "When?" "Early spring," Beatrice replied, smiling at his reaction. "Dr. Peterson says everything looks healthy." Owen pulled her into a gentle embrace, mindful of her condition even in his excitement. "I love you, Beatrice Reeves," he whispered against her hair. "You and our child." As they sat together under the vast Arizona sky, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the public humiliation in Tucson's town square to the happiness she'd found with Owen, it had been a path of both pain and joy. She thought of Sheriff Harmon, serving his sentence in Yuma, and felt not hatred but pity for a man whose bitterness had consumed him. She thought of her father, wishing he could have lived to see her happiness and meet his grandchild. And she thought of that fateful day when a tall cowboy had caught a whip mid-air and said 3 simple words that changed the course of her life. That's enough. It had been enough cruelty, enough injustice. And what had followed was more than enough love and joy to heal the wounds of the past. Spring brought the birth of their son, a healthy boy with his father's green eyes and a shock of dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Beatrice's father. Owen, who had once faced down an armed sheriff without flinching, was completely undone by the tiny infant in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, cradling his son with hands that trembled slightly, just like his mother. As the years passed, the ranch grew and prospered. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined the family 2 years after Thomas. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Owen adding rooms as needed, always with an eye to Beatrice's comfort and convenience. Mrs. Thompson visited often, especially after she retired from the dressmaking business and sold the shop to young Lily Jenkins, who had proven to have quite a talent for design. Judge Parker continued to administer justice fairly in Tucson, though as the town grew, so did the challenges of maintaining order. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Beatrice and Owen would often sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They would talk of the day's events, plan for the future, or sometimes simply sit in comfortable silence, each drawing strength and contentment from the other's presence. Their love story, which had begun with an act of courage in a town square, continued to unfold with each passing day, not always easy, not always smooth, but always rooted in the deep respect and affection that had drawn them together from the very beginning. And whenever life presented challenges, they faced them side by side, remembering that sometimes the bravest act is simply to say, "That's enough," and to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and the promise of tomorrow over the pain of yesterday.